Here we go again. So, hello CSWS. I'm happy to be back with another interview. This time with Jamie Stangroom, interviewer of the Star Wars stars and creator of the fantastic documentary, which many of us are fans of, The Empire Strikes Door, which we will be talking a little bit more about later. So, Jamie, how are you dealing with lockdown? And would you like to outline a bit what your role in the Star Wars universe is?
Yeah, cheers, Josh. Well, thank you for having me. Lockdown, I guess it could be a lot worse. So taking each day as it comes, it is more time at home, obviously, than I normally would, like everybody else. But I'm behaving, which is the main thing. Star Wars and me, I suppose I've got an older brother, and he had the original toys. So at some point down the line, they sort of became mine as hand-me-downs. So it was always in the background of my life. And I think like a lot of people, always being on the television at Christmas, maybe in the background though. So you weren't necessarily, concentrating on it or knew the characters as well as, I do now. But I would say the real awakening came when the special editions came out, because that was when I was able to go and see them on the big screen. And really, it just continued being part of my life. And then in terms of actually being involved with it in a very small way, that really started probably 5 or 6 years ago. I started a series for YouTube called These Are the Actors You're Looking For. So the idea was that The Force Awakens was coming out. It had been announced that Mark Hamill's back, Han Solo's back, Princess Leia's back. But what about low-grade Ewok? What about Greedo? What about the guy who played Jabba the Hutt's tail? What about the stormtrooper that bumped his head? Where are they? Why are they not back? And I know that doesn't necessarily fit into the timeline of Star Wars, the story, but just in general, because these people are mostly in the UK, as you know. So I would go and track them down. I'd do an interview with them, and then do a kind of tongue-in-cheek sort of audition tape to try and show Disney and JJ what they're missing out on, and maybe get them back in a future film. And I started the channel on YouTube. My background is in radio, and I didn't really understand this new devilry of YouTube. But I started the channel specifically for this, and it sort of blew up-ish 3 videos in when I released the episode with Jar Jar Binks, of course. Yeah. And it was really his first sort of interview that he'd done in a long time. And he opened up quite a lot about the backlash, and it sort of it's done very well in terms of views, but it got, so much more traction beyond the views, because it was in pretty much every entertainment site you could think of, even Vanity Fair somehow. So yeah, my rubbish recorded on Skype in Vanity Fair, but and then bizarrely, I didn't really get a call. It just sounds email from someone at Lucasfilm. And I got asked to be the kind of foreign correspondent, UK correspondent for the Star Wars show, the official Star Wars YouTube show, because they had Celebration coming up in London. So I was one of the correspondents there. And since then, I've done a couple of events for them in the UK, and also some sort of print interviews for them for StarWars.com. So doing this thing for YouTube, kind of as a fan, really, ended up bizarrely, nothing to do with any of my broadcasting work that I do. I ended up working sort of for Lucasfilm, for Star Wars. So that's kind of the involvement, I guess.
Yeah, yes, the perfect career track, I suppose, and well, certainly one that I'm hoping to replicate. But
yeah, well, I'm sure you can. If I can do it, then you most definitely can.
We'll find out. Yeah, it's certainly you've got a lot of good interviews with I know a lot of us fans prefer those, really like those behind the scenes stars. And I was just wondering, when you were talking about, I know you're good mates with Ahmed Best, how did you get him or encourage him to do that first interview? Because obviously he was very closed off. He had lots of damage after the Phantom Menace backlash. How did you get him to come back into the fold almost?
Yeah, I mean, I do feel, I would never say because now he's definitely come full circle now. He's officially back in Star Wars with Jedi Temple Challenge. And when we say come back full circle, it's not just physically being back. This is a mental thing, as well, because the guy almost committed suicide over a lot of the backlash he received from Star Wars in his career, whilst he's earned some money from it. And, you know, he was a Star Wars fan, so he'll probably never get over the fact that he's been in Star Wars in a positive way. At the same time, it affected his career badly, because for a long time, and possibly still now, I don't know, he couldn't even get in an audition room by association with Jar Jar. So, yeah, in a very small way, I do feel like I've played a tiny, tiny role, so small, in his return, more because we did this initial interview and that kind of ended up becoming a series of interviews that we sort of do maybe one a year now. Sometimes we go crazy and do two. We even met in person along the way, because all these interviews have been, he's in LA. I'm rarely in LA, but I was, and we met up. So yeah, like to answer the actual question you asked, I think I sent a tweet to him, a public tweet, and then I ended up sliding into his DMs, as you do. and I have no idea why he accepted. And also, just for anyone watching or listening to this, the grunting, snoring in the background, it's not anything to do with me. It's not any of my body parts. There was a little dog sleeping nearby. But as I explained to you, Josh, the alternative was her scratching at the door and barking outside. So, yeah, I don't know why he agreed to do it. I really don't. Although I will say, and I have said this before, the series, These Are the Actors You're Looking For, was originally going to be on the Comedy Central website in the UK.
Really?
So I was doing some interviews for them, a separate thing, and I pitched the idea of These Are the Actors You're Looking For. And it was looking like something I was going to do for them. I started making it anyway with my own money. I mean, it was all very much rough and ready anyway. I think the most expensive thing was, petrol to get to Wales to speak to Jabba the Hutt's tail. But yeah, so I don't know how much, because I've asked him about this since, and he can't really remember either. I don't know how much the potential of the Comedy Central attachment sort of made the initial tweet stand out. But he can't really remember either, and I can't really remember. But there was a tweet, he responded, it went to DMs, and then I remember it took a little bit of time to actually set up the interview, but it happened. But it started on Twitter. It started with a tweet.
That's interesting, because, with my amateur journalist ways, I try to get an interview with him via a direct tweet. Obviously, I didn't have the backing, so it didn't amount to anything. But, it gives me hope that yours did. Yeah,
well, I think now he gets a lot more, because obviously people have now seen, and it's not just me he speaks to anymore. He's doing more interviews. There was a time when it seemed to just be me, but I think now he's getting a lot more requests because people are seeing he's more active and more open.
Yeah.
And he may not even see your tweets, because he I mean, he hasn't got a million followers, but he's got something like 30,000, and he gets a lot. You know what the Star Wars fandom's like. 30,000 followers may as well be a million, because a lot of them are so sort of hardcore, and any kind of Jar Jar meme they see, they'll tag him in it, etc. So yeah, and also he's not on it all that much, as far as I know. Sort of pops on and off, but doesn't live on it. So keep trying. I'll put in a good word for you.
Oh, that would mean the world. I just spamming with you. No, I would never do that. But I think from SWS's perspective, we've been quite lucky that we started doing interviews in lockdown when a lot of people have time, or we've kind of taken advantage of that a little bit. But we'll see how it grows. But yes, back to the interview. So that's your basis in Star Wars. I'd certainly like to talk a little bit about your fantastic documentary, The Empire Strikes Jaw, in which I'll just briefly outline it for those who haven't seen it, which if they haven't, definitely should. It's a documentary exploring who was that stormtrooper who banged their head in that classic scene in A New Hope. And because there's multiple people claiming to be that stormtrooper. So it's a very fantastic documentary. You come to a conclusion about who you think it is. But what I have been stuck up on ever since watching it is the man who was determined not to be the correct stormtrooper. What was his reaction to the documentary? Because his career was built off being that stormtrooper who banged his head.
Yeah, I know who you mean. There's only 3 people to choose from, and I'm pretty sure I know who you mean.
Names,
it's Laurie, yeah? Laurie Good, you're thinking of?
Laurie. Who lost the polygraph test.
Yes, exactly. There was only one. That was Laurie. Yeah, and just to say, it still feels weird calling it a documentary. I suppose it is, but it was really meant to be just one of these sort of 6 to 8 minute. These are the actors you're looking for videos. When I said I was trying to track down the guy who played Jabba the Hutt's tail, the guy who played Greedo, Ahmed, all very easy to find these people. But when it came to finding the stormtrooper who bumped his head, who, as you said, such an iconic, the most iconic stormtrooper probably. I found a number of someones, and it spiraled out of control and became accidentally The Empire Strikes Door, a full-on, I guess, documentary. How did he react to it, to Laurie? I mean, yeah, as you said, Laurie wanted it. Laurie wanted it the most out of the three suspects, because one of them wouldn't even talk to me about it in the end, and one of them, Martin, who ended up winning. Spoiler alert. Bit late for that. You meant to put the spoiler alert before you reveal the reveal. But yeah, he was so chilled about it. And even when I told him he'd won, he was just a bit like, cool.
He does
Laurie, on the other hand,
documentary.
yeah, he's just so calm about it. But Laurie, on the other hand, as you said, he did dine out on it a bit at the convention scene. He was signing the picture of the head bump, the freeze frame. However, and we do, this is said in a documentary, he did always add the caveat that he can't prove it was him, which I couldn't prove either. So he has always said that, but at the same time, he still signs those pictures, and he didn't react too positively to the result, and he still believes it was him. And I haven't heard from him in a little while, but as of probably January, he was telling me on a Facebook message that he was, planning a sort of, not in a nasty way to me or a negative way, but he was planning a fight back, like to do his own sort of investigation, and do his own interviews and make his own video. And I said to him, if he can unearth some more evidence that goes in his favour, I will reopen the investigation quite happily. But I've not heard from him in a few months. But then obviously COVID and all that. He's still alive though. I've seen him pop up on Facebook. So.
That's ideal. We'll see how that story pans out. But no, that is I'm such a big fan of that documentary. I think it's such a unique idea. I know you've said a few times that perhaps didn't get the traction that you thought it would.
Yeah, man.
I think regardless, like it's definitely a success in my eyes, and yeah, I think it will keep building.
Yeah, I guess it's like all of the interviews and anything you do as well with a Star Wars actor. We're talking now in 2020 to people who were, if it was the original film, who were in a film that came out in 1977. So the fact that we're still talking about it 40 plus years, you like to think that this sort of content will still be, maybe relevant's not the word, but still be something that people are interested in another 40 years. So yeah, things like The Empire Strikes Door, I think over time might get closer to whatever number of views I had in my mind, to be satisfactory, if you like. Yeah. I think it's evergreen content, isn't it? We're not talking about, the latest sort of gossip or something like that. It's all
it's a permanent fixture. Maybe one day it'll even come out alongside a DVD release or something.
Yeah, maybe it'll be on Disney Plus one day. Who knows?
Yes, well, we hope. But no, yeah, I'm such a big fan of that documentary. But I do find even when I'm interviewing certain actors, obviously I don't go and meet them as you've done. There does seem to be it's quite hard to kind of get lots of traction for interviewing actors and stuff like that, which I've always found quite odd because, I've interviewed people like James Arnold Taylor and, to kind of minimal reception. I'm not angry about that, but it's just like, it's interesting how there's that similarity.
Yeah, I agree. And part of me, like, it's quite sad to say this, but at the moment, I'm sort of using lockdown in my favour, like you said as well, sort of using it as a chance to speak to people. But I'm also using it as almost as an excuse not to go and meet them in person. Now, that's not personal to them. That's more because when obviously you go out and do an interview, unless you're neighbours, it costs you money to go and do it.
Yeah.
And it's always disheartening when you put time into something and you don't get the results that you want, but it's also sort of it's a double negative when you also spent money that you're you're hard pressed to get your money back, especially with YouTube advertising revenue being so low. But like, you don't mind if you spend your own money on something that's a success, because it will come back and benefit you in other ways, eventually down the line. But when you get the tumbleweed in terms of the views, and then you're like, oh man, I spent a couple £100 going to do that. When it's not paying you, you can't do that. You can't keep doing that. You can't keep spending your own money on something that isn't, bringing anything back. So I'm sort of using the lockdown to get more interviews in the can. I'm actually doing one after we speak, which is why I've got this TV screen up here. I've got a second camera. These are the actors you're looking for. So I'm taking the opportunity to do more on Skype and Zoom and whatever else during lockdown, but not just because we're all in lockdown together and people are presumably around more, or at least have less excuses to say I'm not in. I'm doing it because also it's just an excuse not to, because I'm the kind of person that will just go and do it and then regret doing it later in person, and I've said, oh man, that money I could do with that. I've got bills to pay. So yeah, no, I agree with you. There's so much goes into it, and money's one thing, but then even when you do it on Skype, it's still, you're still putting a lot of work into it and the edits and you just kind of think, there is an audience for this, so why aren't I getting the views? And YouTube is such a difficult beast. I can only speak from experience on YouTube. I don't really upload content to other platforms, but to the point where I know that only something like 8% of my subscribers, and it's not a big number, there's 14,000 subscribers ish, and I know that only 8% of them get told when I upload a video.
Really?
So you're fighting a losing battle, even if you've got a small fan base. Yeah, it really is. So you could be making the best content in the world, and it almost doesn't matter because it probably won't get seen, and it's really I think quite depressing. But on the other hand, I do believe that if you keep at it, you will eventually get one video. One video is all it takes, really, to have the knock-on effect, because remember what we said, this content is evergreen. James Arnold Taylor will always be part of the Star Wars, a legend in the Star Wars circles in 10 years, in 20 years. And you're doing career interviews. You're not just talking about their most latest recent thing. Yeah. So I do believe that that's the sort of positive to have in mind, that even though you're getting the tumbleweed now and it's demoralizing, and maybe you're even spending your own money on it, which you should probably, should be putting elsewhere. I do believe it could, be worthwhile still, this interview that you did 10 years ago down the line. Because the Ahmed Best is an example of that, sort of, because I told you it's the third video I uploaded to the channel. Yeah. Now, I already had Jeremy Bullock, Boba Fett as episode 1, and I had Paul Blake Greedo as episode 2. Ahmed was episode 3. And I think when I uploaded them, I got like 100 subscribers quite quickly, based off the back of a trailer and a few Star Wars sort of Facebook pages sharing it and stuff. And then those two interviews got something like, they were closing in on 1,000 views each, which I thought was quite good for a channel that literally just started overnight, But when the Ahmed interview went up, and there was probably, 3-week, gap between that one and those two, it exploded. And it wasn't just the views on the Ahmed video, it was the views on the other two videos. They jumped up to something like 10,000 views, 12,000 views. These days, I think they're both on around 30,000 views. So what I'm saying is, if I only had 2 other videos. If I had another 10 videos, well, that would have been 8 other videos that would have quadrupled. Again, I think it's just one interview. You need one interview, and it's sort of like the other thing as well. Sorry if I'm rambling about this, but the other thing as well is people. I think it is an audience who want to hear from these actors, no matter how small their role was, or even if they just worked behind. I say just work behind the scenes, but even if they work behind the scenes, which is obviously very important. I think there is a big audience of people that want to hear their stories and their positive memories. But unfortunately, I think there's a bigger audience that want to hear negativity and anger.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Towards Star Wars.
So Star Wars fandom is very toxic.
Yeah, and I feel like, I don't really work for Lucasfilm. It's like a freelance agreement, and it's so rare that I do anything, which is partly my bad, because it is down to me as well to pitch things to them. But I sort of, in some ways, I feel like, oh, I should be careful anyway because of that sort of involvement. But on the other hand, I'm like, oh, but I'm also tempted to do a really nasty sort of clickbaity, title when I do an interview with someone who said something that could be seen as negative towards, Ryan Johnson or something. But I don't have to do that, it seems, because the interviews I have done recently that have got some traction have been, and I don't like, I mean, I'm grateful for the views, but I sort of feel a bit embarrassed by it because, so Tim Rose, puppeteer for Admiral Akbar,
Yeah.
he spoke to me about obviously his career in general. We talked about The Last Jedi, about Akbar's death, and I agree. I do think he got a lame exit from the franchise. It was a bit lame, it was in the background, wasn't it? It was sort of throwaway comment. Oh, Admiral Akbar didn't make it. And he told a story that, they also filmed, close-ups of him getting blown out of the ship, and it was all very dramatic and cool, and, sort of good send-off for him. And he also talked about how he was upset to learn on the day that his character was finished, because he would come in each day and see the scripts. He wasn't given the script to take away. So he said he read it and he cried. He cried in the suit because he realised this character that he's grown to love and has been part of his life for however many years now, that's it. It's definitely all over. And I would have liked a bigger role. Which, how many actors? Every actor wants a bigger role. He's not unusual to say he would have liked a bigger role. Now, that got twisted by certain parts of the media, the kind of the nerd media, if you like, to Star Wars actor blasts Ryan Johnson. Ryan Johnson made him cry. He was bullied. He was left sobbing in the suit because of the way he was treated by the crew. And it's like, no. He didn't say that. If you watch the video, you will see that he's saying it in a very warm way. His tongue was in cheek at times, but things obviously get manipulated and turned into what sells, what gets clicks, Yeah. Now, if I had released the interview with that headline, I think I used a headline like Admiral Akbar actor talks about his alternative death or his spectacular death, which we never saw or something, because I would say to Ryan Johnson, I thought it was a bit of a lame way he got killed off. This other version, sounds great, but I understand, when you get to the edit, things have to change and things have to be different. I got 25,000 views for that video in the end, which is more than The Empire Strikes Door, which took 3 years to make or more. And this interview with Tim took 20 minutes on Skype. But anyway, if I'd gone with the title, Star Wars actor was bullied by, Ryan Johnson and speaks out, etc., I would have got 100,000 views or more,
Yeah.
And that's sort of, I don't want to go down that path though.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's the path that sells.
Yeah, and I think certainly YouTube and social media and stuff, it makes it look like number of clicks or number of views equals good. But I don't think that's the case at all. Like Empire Strikes Door may not have those clicks, but it's like one of the best bits of Star Wars journalism I've seen. And like it's looking at the number of clicks, I think, on YouTube. I think the YouTube algorithm is kind of geared towards that negative mindset.
Yeah, it is. And by the way, I don't like when I say I don't like that kind of approach, that's not because of the connections with Lucasfilm. I'm not thinking about, I might lose the job that I do twice a year or something. I'm thinking it's not true. And I am a journalist, and it's not true. You are twisting these people's words. So I know Tim doesn't have a problem with me. Maybe Tim liked the exposure he got, but he never said, "Oi, what did you do to our interview? You've edited this out of context," because he knows I didn't. It's the afterwards, who write the headlines and the articles. Yes, but at the same time, they gave me some exposure, but it's not how I'd like it to go.
Yeah, it's certainly like from the short time I've worked in this, it's like there's these similar. You're working with a kind of fandom and landscape, which is you kind of don't want to work with, but also you're passionate about the things you create. It's whole complicated thing.
It really is. It happened again recently when I had my most recent chat with Ahmed. Now, I sent the interview afterwards to a few of my sort of friends and contacts, and I said, Jar Jar in the Obi-Wan series, because it was one of those rumors that kind of come from nowhere saying that he was going to have a cameo. But they didn't really go on that. I think some people did eventually. They went on the fact that he sort of was negative about the Disney sequel trilogy. He wasn't really negative about it. He said that Jedi Temple Challenge for him goes back to what he loved about Star Wars, the Force being this mysterious thing that you had to work hard, to be good at. And he did reference that in the sequel trilogy, it seems to be something that you take for granted a bit more, and you're just able to pull ships out of the sky just because you can. He was not saying it in a negative way, but of course there were the headlines that he blasted the sequel trilogy, and I know, so.
But I think it's worth persevering because it's what we love to do.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Regardless of media construing it. But I'll move on to more because I know you've got to go soon. Because you have your interview with Jabba the Hutt. But I shall move on to perhaps more. Well, I'll skip ahead a bit because
whatever you want to do. I've got at least 20 minutes. So whatever you want to.
That is
The interview's at 3, and I said 2:45 to you yesterday because I didn't think I'd have time to set up all the lights and stuff before and this separate camera. But I'm completely set up. So yeah, if I'm done by 5 to 3, all good.
Oh yeah, that's fantastic. Well, I'll move on to a bit more about the interviewing process. This is a bit of a selfish question, being a kind of a wannabe interviewee myself. But do you have any kind of tips for going down that path and how to kind of tied to what we were just saying, but kind of any tips for aspiring interviewers, freelance journalists, that kind of thing? Maybe like me, maybe like someone else.
Yeah, well, I think okay, don't lie about the Comedy Central thing. I wasn't lying at the time, but I think having anything you can to give you leverage to tag on to what you're doing is obviously useful, and I think Cambridge University is
definitely.
So I think anything you can do to make whatever you're doing sound better, and everything can sound better, even if you're doing something for the BBC, you can still make it sound better. And I know from my BBC work, you still play around with numbers a bit, when you're pitching to a publicist to get an interview, to get on a press junket or what have you, you always give the higher end of your figures, even though that doesn't necessarily mean that this time slot or this interview that you're doing will reach that number of people. But hang on, but we got that number once when the Olympics was on and everybody was watching the BBC. So don't lie, but be creative, I guess. But certainly do not lie, because you will get found out. I'm sure. Look, no, lie, of course. But be creative and be. I think what I'm saying is be creative. Again, do not lie, but also don't be shy. Don't be apologetic. Be confident of your platform, and never say, "Oh, I know you're very busy, and I know I'm a small channel or something." Never say that. Let them. If that's the reason they don't want to do it, let them decide that. Don't tell them that. Don't plant that sort of negative charity seed, I guess, to begin with. But also, I would say, look for something that they might want to talk about. So, 9 times out of 10, when you see any celebrity getting interviewed, they're there because they're selling something, whether it be the new film, the book, the album, or even if they're promoting a charity cause. And whatever the final output is, it's usually about 10%, 20% is talked about, what they're there to talk about, because everybody else wants to talk about that film they did 20 years ago, which everybody loved, So, when we're in charge, when we decide how long our interviews are, when we decide the edit and what have you, we don't have to worry about, but we only have a 6-minute slot. We need to talk about this, we need to talk about that, but oh God, we got to talk about that annoying new book. So use that to the advantage in the sense that look for something that you can offer them. So if Tim Rose, for example, has his own website where he uploads a blog about his life as a puppeteer, you'll talk about that. and you'll link to that, and you'll heavily link to it, and you'll verbally say it in the opener of the introduction, and you'll also link to it in the video description. Maybe a lot of these guys have, the Star Wars, have their own websites where they sell their autographs, for people who can't get to conventions. So you'll promote that as well. And then when you think about it, if they've got nothing better to do, even if 100 people watch this interview, well, if 5 people or even one person went and bought their book or bought their autograph, then they've got some value, financial value out of it. So I think be confident, and be creative with how you pitch it, but again, don't lie. Do some extra research to see what they might have to promote, and it might be something they never realized they had to promote. It might be the fact that you could say my audience are regular attendees at conventions. Person thinks, oh, I go to conventions. Oh, and if they see me in this, they might know more about me, and and think I'm amazing and want to come and pay for my autograph. So think of, like, if you have to tell them what they can get out of it, then do that. Don't be shy. Okay. And also, I think the best places really are conventions. So obviously this is something that isn't happening at the moment, but if you go to a convention, and again, don't be crazy. Don't fly to San Diego to go and do a load of interviews unless you really want to go to San Diego anyway. But if there's a convention near you, then go all day. Contact who you can in advance. Always contact the organizer to say you're coming around. You won't get in the way, but as long as they haven't got a problem with it, you're going to do a couple of interviews. It's just you and one other person, one camera, very simple setup. And you'll never get in the way when someone's got a queue, and if you can contact the people in advance on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, great. But to be honest, when you've seen interviews that I've done at conventions, I would say only 50% of those I had arranged in advance. A lot of it's just turning up on a day when you see they haven't got a line, just going up and saying, look, I'm doing this. When you get a spare 10 minutes, because they're there anyway.
Yes,
and you can also get a load done in one day.
Yes. Get out of the way. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm rambling, but I think yeah, that's how I play it. That's how I play it to this day, to be honest, still.
Yeah, well, I'll when conventions start up again, I'll just lurk around the Star Wars tables, because it's obviously hard to make a career from this, but we try.
Yeah, but you can. But the thing is, you can make a career out of it, and I'm looking now to. I'm getting sort of tired of my other sort of professional lines, if you like. So I'm looking to make this more on a relaunch and new ideas and what have you, and a new Star Wars series actually, which is too new to talk about. But I will tell you about it, Josh. At the moment we've only written one script and there's a lot of work to do. Again, I think this is really important to not apologize and just be confident in your brand and your platform and tell them why they should come on it in a charming way. We will promote your website and tell people about your autograph section or your merchandise or whatever. Just find anything. Or also, sorry, one more thing as well. If you see something about their career which they're clearly more interested in themselves, but never got any kind of publicity, like maybe they had a sort of a band, that they were in, and that was their passion, but the acting sort of, it's the extra work quite often in this game, took off. Say, oh, I read on your biography that you're in a band, I'd be interested in hearing more about that as well. And then that kind of thing. So, oh yeah, I've never really got to speak about my band before. So, yeah, okay, we'll do that.
Yeah, because people like talking about their
passions. Yeah. And these guys aren't necessarily Star Wars fans, so if you offer them something else, that they do want to talk about, then I think that increases your chances.
I think that is fantastic tips. And I'm sure any other budding interviewers listening shall take them on board. But since we talked a lot about the process, of what we do, of what you do professionally, I think I asked some of the members of CUSWS to come up with kind of Jamie Stangroom-esque questions, because you ask a very particular like a comedic slant to your interviews, and ask interview subjects kind of strange, odd questions to see what their reactions are. And I would be interested to see if any of your interviews who have ever reacted badly to that approach, or no?
Good question.
Just,
Non-Star Wars, non-YouTube, yes. I had an interview with, years ago now, I'm going to say it, Rio Ferdinand, the ex-Manchester United and England player, that went, I guess, horribly wrong, you could say, because it almost ended up with, I'm not going to say who the interview was for, the platform, but almost ended up, well, it did end up with them getting threatened to be sued. But all I will say is, everything I asked and I got him to do was all pre-agreed, and he obviously just changed his mind after he did it. Oh, hang on, that made me look stupid. And yeah, so that went bad, and that was not the reaction I expected or wanted. Nothing's ever gone as bad as someone wanting to sue, threatening to sue if we upload this video. It never saw the light of day in the end. This video I did with Rio Ferdinand. Possibly.
Well, I suppose that's kind of the footballer persona, isn't it?
Yeah, and he had this bubble around him, and again, everything we did was pre-agreed. He obviously just sort of on the way home started to overthink things, and am I going to look stupid? And it's like, well, hang on, dude, you agreed to this, and I'll say it was Comedy Central. It was the UK web online platform, not the TV channel. So yeah, nothing he did was sprung on him, but. Yeah, that wasn't good. That wasn't fun in the end. Star Wars wise, well, Laurie, because he wasn't happy with how the Empire Strikes Back ended. I will say, but this wasn't his fault. Interviewing Dave Prowse Darth Vader, the body of Darth Vader.
He was quite ill, wasn't he?
Yeah, that didn't go. I mean, the edit's fine, but it was heavily edited. He does suffer with dementia, and there was just a few moments where, let's just say, he got confused, and it was a bit kind of almost. I think if I'd known that in advance how it was going to be, I wouldn't have gone and done the interview. So probably from a Star Wars point of view, it was the Dave Prowse one that was the most uncomfortable. But no one's ever reacted negatively with Star Wars, as far as I know.
Yeah, that is. I'd be interested how your interview with, I can't remember the actor's name, but of Tamiri Black, the child actor you did recently. Was that different from normal? Because he's obviously a child.
Yeah, I thought that was going to be a lot harder than it was. To have a video that wouldn't require much editing, that because I'm trying at the moment to experiment with different durations, and I wanted to do a short upload for this. In the end, it was a really hard edit, so I ended up with something like half an hour, and I got it down to like an 8-minute version and I think a 15-minute version, but that's a long edit. I was hoping it would just be cut out a few awkward silences and upload it. It's good to go. But he was really surprisingly really well spoken and funny and bright, and didn't take much prodding either. I will say, because I haven't got that much experience of interviewing kids. I did send the questions. You can't send all the questions because some are tangent questions, but I sent the sort of the main bullet points, if you like, to his mum in advance. And I think that's a useful thing to do with someone who's not experienced with interviews. At the end of the day, you're not there to stitch them up. You want the best out of them, You
want to make poor Tamiri Black look bad. I mean, the child actors in Star Wars have a hard enough time as is on record. So yes.
Yeah, exactly. But I think the fact that it's an iconic minor role, but the fact that it was such a minor role, I don't know. He's already had this other role in Killing Eve, and it was quite a big role, and he was really good in it. So I think he's he wasn't mainstream Star Wars kid actor, if you like. He wasn't front and center, and only sort of hardcore, and maybe casual fans as well, really know who he is. But my dad, who watches the films but doesn't, know much beyond what he sees in the moment, he wouldn't even remember, that kid. So yeah, I think he's going to do all right.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, because he was good in the movie. But I'll just look for one, perhaps two last questions, quick fire questions to finish off with. In one of your interviews, I believe it was with Force Centre, you mentioned Steve Coogan as an influence. A lot of us CUSWS members are big Steve Coogan fans, big Alan Partridge fans specifically. So if you were to be a Steve Coogan character, or if you were to be an Alan Partridge character, which one would you be?
I think, do you know what? Whether I like it or not, I think I'd be Alan Partridge, because I did the hospital radio, I did local radio, radio was my background, and it's so hard at times to not be Alan Partridge.
Really?
You know, and I've done jobs where I'm sort of like busking it, because he's busking it, you know, like I've done quite a lot of live sports commentary jobs and announcing in like arenas and stuff, and I don't know, I've got time to fill, and I don't know enough about the sport. I'm there for the job, if you like, and you just end up saying things that straight away hindsight hits you like, oh, that was a bit Partridge. Yeah. So I think I feel like Richard Bacon is like the closest we've got to a real life Alan Partridge, if you remember Richard Bacon. But I think we all have those moments when, especially when you're doing radio shows, and you know, because I don't want to be Alan Partridge, but I think I would be Alan Partridge.
That is an interesting insight into the radio profession. But I know you've got another interview to go to, so I won't keep you any longer. I'll stop recording and then say goodbye. It's
okay. There's a few minutes still, so anything you want to throw in still, it's all good.
Well, I think I've got some things that I'll probably mention post interview, but for this CUSWS, whatever the initials are, recorded section, I would just say thank you very much for talking with us, and I would once again encourage anyone who has not already to check out Jamie's interviews, and especially the Empire Strikes Door documentary, which is fab.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Josh.
So that's the recording